We're here in Tampa, Florida at Cypress Point Park. It's kind of near Tampa International Airport, so if you hear some planes buzzing through the air, that's what the noises are. We're gonna talk about some putting theories and techniques, you know, just to make you be a little bit better in scoring and getting your disc in the basket when you're trying to finish the hole. Now we're gonna go to more of a traditional stance. Right foot forward, left foot back for a right-handed backhanded putter. You step up to the mini, make sure you give yourself an inch or two, you know, behind it so you don't kick it while you're putting. I like to think of there's an imaginary line running from the basket between my feet. So the imaginary line is going to be here, right? It's not really there, but that's the line you want to think about. So my plant foot's going to be on the right side of the line. My push foot's going to be on the left side of the line. So now my body's centered over that line, right? So your center of gravity is on top of that line. You want to move your body back and forth over that line, so all of your energy, your push energy, is on that line. And as well, you want to take your hand and run it up and down that line as your body's going up and down that line. So everything is kind of centered on that line. Your body weight, your shift, your arm, your hand. So you get a nice little rock going, drop back, push forward. I don't really suggest that everybody putt my style because it's, you know, to each their own on putting, but I would really like to see everybody use that line and the weight shift over top of that line with their arm on the line, no matter how you choose to putt. We just discussed the line, the imaginary line running from the basket between your legs when you're standing in this position. Now I want to talk about kind of what your hand is going to do upon release. I see a lot of people where their hand doesn't open fully and they kind of leave it in this position after they open their hand to release the putt. I like to see the hand become fully open and stretched out like this. You putt and I want your hand to be open. That way you're getting the max leverage out of your fingers in hand. That hand fully open when you release. Release that thing out there and spread those fingers, open that hand. That way you're getting everything you can out of your hand. The downside to not opening your hand fully would be an inaccurate release and not a full power on your putt. You know, if you tend to keep your hand crimped a little bit after you've opened it, I don't think you're going to get the full power on your putt that you want. And I think the release point is also, you know, strengthened a little bit when you release your hand fully and open it up. Kind of like a basketball shooter. You know, when they shoot a basketball, their hand is like, it's open and the wrist is fully bent after they shoot. They don't go like this and, you know, like close their hand. They keep it wide open and they bend their wrist. And the same kind of thing I'm talking about here. You want to keep that thing open, snap that wrist up, open, up, and almost reverse of a basketball. You're going this way, opening it up. It helps you keep it on line as well. Another point I'd like to make about having a consistent release and a consistent accuracy on your putt is your eye line, what your eyes are doing. You want to, on a headwind putt, you might want to have your eyes aim a little bit lower in the chains or the target because it's naturally going to want to lift when you throw a headwind putt. And conversely, if you have a tailwind, you're going to want to take your eye line and bring it up maybe towards the top band and look right at the top band because your putt's going to drop a little bit. And if you're in a no-win situation, you basically want to focus on a link. Get the smallest focus point you can on the basket, that way it hones in your focus. Aim small, miss small. Now we're going to talk about the connection between you and the disc, which is the grip. I have slightly bigger hands, and so it might not work for some of you guys, but this is what works for me. I grip the disc the same whether I'm putting, upshotting, or driving. Kind of a modified power grip. It's we call it the fork grip, or it's almost the same grip you would use to write or eat with. Right? You stick your fingers kind of rolled on top of each other like this, then your index finger is slightly separated and your thumb's pinching in. And the way it looks like on the disc is like this from the underside, where your index finger is just kind of off the other three and on the rim by itself. And then these three, they kind of stack on top of the pinky. So I'm only having 2 release points underneath the disc. I release my pinky and those 2 fingers as one, and I release this as one. So that's 2 release points. And some people, when they grip it with 4 fingers underneath. Now you've got 4 different release points, which makes more variables in the end. On top, I'd like to see your thumb a good solid inch away from the edge. I don't like when the people's thumbs are out here. You have less control over the disc. It seems like you want to slip off more. So I'd like to see your thumb get, you know, a good solid 3/4 to an inch away from the edge. And that way, when you press in on the top, you can kind of feel this edge kind of making a little bump right here, and it gives you just a little bit of push off the top of the disc. Same thing when you drive. You're gonna want to push that thumb in about an inch from the edge so you can push the top edge of the disc. And that's the way I grip it pretty much every throw if I'm throwing backhand. Putting, upshotting, driving, it's all the same for me. So it's very consistent. Well, first we're gonna talk about your setup, your stance to the putt. Obviously, when there's some trees in the way and you have to putt around things, you're gonna set up straddle, you know, out this way like this, and that's a very common way to get around an obstacle. If you have to go left or right, like this. That's to avoid obstacles. Say this tree was in my way right here, and my disc was right here behind it. I would want to straddle one way or straddle the other way, just to give yourself a nice clean look, you know, with your arm swing and your disc flight. So that's a variation of the putt that everybody's gonna have to use at some point or another, and, you know, to each their own on that one. Just figure out how it works for you. And you wanna get a little bit of knee flex going on when you're straddle putting. You don't wanna be really stiff-legged and just do all arm. You wanna have a little knee flex in there and get some bounce in there, and let your legs and hips kind of give you a little extra power, because it's hard to get extra power when you're standing straddle. You don't have much push. There's nothing to push off of. You're just standing this way. So let your knee flex help you out a bit, and snap it up there like that. Now we're going to talk about anything outside circle one, you know, your longer putts, your 45, 50, 60 footers, things like that. I've got a bit of a theory that you want to put the disc a little bit higher in the air and let it, you know, reach an apex halfway to the basket, and then drop the remaining flight to the basket. That way, when you're approaching the basket with your disc is falling out of the sky and not winging by the basket, you know, 25, 30 feet, because you're on such a straight line to the basket. If you putt really hard from 50 or 60 feet and you're zipping it this way, if you miss everything, it's gonna go 20, 25 feet long. Obviously, there's gonna be some times where you have low ceiling putts where you're gonna have to give it some zip, and that's, you know, that's a chance you're gonna have to take. If you wanna zip it in there in a low ceiling putt, you might end up going a little bit by if you miss everything. But for the most part, I'd like to see the disc get a foot or two above the basket from, you know, 45, 50 feet out with some speed touch to where it's gonna be dropping. And when your disc is dropping into the chains, it has a better chance at sticking, I think, than if it's rising or going really flat and hard. So dropping in, kind of like a basketball into a hoop, you know? If a basketball's coming this way at a hoop, it has less chance of going in. If it's coming this way at a hoop, it has a lot better chance of going in. That's my theory on longer putts, is having some speed control and giving it a little bit of loft above the basket top. You see the disc was, you know, foot and a half, 2 feet above the basket, halfway there, kind of an apex, and then dropping from the apex point down. Now we're gonna get into the slightly longer putts, you know, outside 50 feet, and a lot of people like to jump putt. I like to jump putt at about, you know, between 45 and 50 feet is where I kind of start jump putting. I don't like to jump putt inside 45 feet. I like to use my regular stance there. But outside 45, 50 feet, depending on the conditions, I like to stand straddle. Kind of I call it the Frogger jump putt, where I kind of look like a frog. Get some knee flex in there, you know, get some body motion going, kind of feel what you're gonna do, and really bend those knees and jump forward. But you gotta release the disc before you hit. So I think if you're not releasing the disc as you're still on the ground, you're not gonna have a really good putt. Like I see some people they're up in the air when they're releasing it, and it just doesn't work very well. I think you have to release the disc while your feet are still on the ground. Your feet might be like this as you're releasing, but you haven't jumped yet. You are still in the process of jumping when you release. The jump just gives you that extra oomph to get it there from 50 or 60 feet. As you can see, I putt with a little bit of hyzer, and I think that's good for also keeping your disc close to the basket. And you only have to adjust for one angle. If you putt flat, your disc can go right, it can go left, it can go straight. There's 3 different things you can do. But if you putt with a little bit of hyzer, the only thing you can do is go left. So that's kind of why I choose that way. So there's only one variable. It's only going left. So I aim out a little bit to the right. The farther I get out away from the basket, the farther right I aim and the higher I aim. Now we're gonna go to a slightly encumbered putt where you have things that are hanging down that you can't put a high putt or a loft putt on. You're gonna have to go underneath. You're gonna have to maybe change your stance a little bit, get lower, throw more of a rising putt or something of that nature. These little branches right here are kind of exactly the kind of situation you might get in on a course, is being under these branches. So I can't stand here and putt my normal putt because all this stuff's in the way. So what I'd have to do is I'd have to get really low in a straddle position and get my hand close to the ground so I can get under these limbs. Or you go to a knee and you kind of putt the normal stance, but use your knee as your front foot rather than your foot. So that way you just want to get your hand as low to the ground as you can so you can avoid the obstacles that are super low. And this is going to be almost more of a rising putt. It's not going to be a loft to drop putt. It's going to be a low to high putt. So if I start down here at low, you know, I'm going to have to putt upwards and get the disc to go higher than the hand on release. All right, when you're doing a knee putt like this, you wanna make sure you don't push too hard off your back foot, because if you push too hard, you're gonna fall forward and you're gonna have to touch your hand for balance, and that's gonna be a foot fault or a stance violation. So make sure you got a good knee plant and your body won't, your body momentum won't take you past your knee where you have to put your hand down. That's always something good to think about. But you definitely want to have this foot back if you got the knee down to give you just a little bit of push, because it's hard to get energy from down here. So stick my foot back like this and keep my hand low to the ground and push. Something like that. Hopefully that helps you out. Well, those were some of my more physical traits to putting and theories on putting. I'd like to talk a little bit more about the mental side. Shorter putts, you've made them in your mind. They're short, you can't give yourself anything on the course. You got to focus on every shot. So make sure you're mentally prepared, even on the short putts. Be mentally strong. Wait for distractions and anything that might mess you up in the area. Look around, make sure there's nothing that's going to distract you. Clean your stance where you're going to stand off a little bit, wipe the ground off, make sure your footing's good. Same thing with your back foot, make sure you're going to have a good area to plant and push, make sure you have a good area to stand, a good area to release from. And beyond that, best of luck out there on the greens.